Hi, I'm Erin Jeanne McDowell, and I am so excited to be making this incredibly delicious apple dumpling recipe for you today because I made an amazing apple discovery. I, up until now, have had kind of my favorite baking apples, but that's before I discovered this beautiful apple, the Cosmic Crisp. Now that I have discovered this apple, which is not only delicious for eating out of hand, but so great for baking, it is the perfect apple to use in one of my favorite recipes from my new cookbook, the Book on Pie. So let's make it together. My whole apple dumpling recipe is so easy, and it's all the delicious flavors of apple pie, but without all the fuss. You basically are just gonna cook an entire apple, bake it with a little bit of sugar inside, wrap that baby in pie dough, and then we can also play around with some fun ways to decorate it too. So first step, we need to core our apples. And in this case, what I'm gonna use, you can use an apple corer, you can even use a paring knife, or if you've got a clean pipe, just make sure you give it a good wash first. That actually works particularly well because it's nice and long. I'm gonna center it right in the middle of the stem end of the apple and press firmly down into it. When I'm pressing into the core, the best thing is that with these particular apples, the core is very centered because these apples are really beautiful and round in shape. And they also have the most beautiful natural red color that stays even when they have been baked. So that skin will stay nice and vibrantly red. We'll even be able to see it a little bit when we cut into our apple dumplings. I'm gonna use a little melon baller to just scrape out any additional parts of the core that didn't come out. Usually you can see a couple maybe seeds, and we just wanna get all of that out because we want to be able to eat this entire dumpling. The crust, the whole apple, everything. We're gonna lightly sweeten these apples with a mixture of sugar and spices, but when you're using Cosmic Crisp apples, you can actually reduce the amount of sugar in the recipe because they're naturally very sweet apples. They're incredibly juicy, but they still retain their shape when baking, which makes them the perfect baking apple because they've got both the flavor and also that ideal texture. So I'm just gonna push this down into the core of each apple. The other thing I love about this particular recipe is that you can make as many as you want. When you make a pie, you have to make an entire pie serving potentially lots of people. But with these apple dumplings, you could make 1, you could make 6, you could make 12. So the next step is what we are going to add in with our apple. So what I have in here is 3 tablespoons granulated sugar, 3 tablespoons light brown sugar. I also have a little bit of cinnamon, a little nutmeg, and a little salt. You can kind of customize that blend to whatever you like. Apples are so incredibly versatile, and Cosmic Crisp, because they're sweet, are particularly versatile. Spices like cardamom, cinnamon, different spice blends, even citrus zest would all be great pairings for your apple dumplings. So I just mix those together so that I've got it ready to go. I also have a little bit of butter because I like to put a little bit of butter on top of the apple just to kind of richen things up a little bit. But like I mentioned, because these apples are naturally very sweet, we actually only need a little bit of sugar. Makes it a really nice dessert option when you're trying to keep things a little bit less sweet as well. So once you have your cold pie dough from the fridge, we're gonna wanna lightly flour our work surface. I'm just using all-purpose flour, and I'm being pretty generous because my philosophy with flour is if you apply a lot at the beginning, you often don't need to add too much more while you're rolling, and that prevents you from using too much. Using too much flour can actually make the pie dough really tough. So we wanna make sure we only use what we need to use, but also that we don't end up with any sticky messes. You can see my pie dough is actually in sort of a rectangular shape. And the reason for that is after I was done mixing it, I intentionally shaped it that way because it makes it a little bit easier to do the apple dumpling process when you start with a square or rectangle. So I'm just gonna use a rolling pin, and I'm gonna roll this out to about 1/4 of an inch thick, maybe just a hair thicker than 1/4 of an inch thick. And when you're rolling out pie dough, it's really important to keep it moving. That also helps prevent it from sticking. So you can pick it up and rotate it, flip it over. Really, all of those movements make sure that it's not sticking to the surface without having to add any more flour. I like to use a rolling pin without handles like this, a French style rolling pin. But with hand tools like this in baking, there's no one right way. It's all about what feels right to you and what works for you. So if you like a rolling pin with handles, you go for it. As your dough starts getting longer, if it makes you nervous to pick it up and handle it the way that I'm just throwing it around here, you can also use your rolling pin. You can roll the dough up onto the rolling pin and use it to help you rotate and transfer the dough, move it around your board. Okay, this is about the right thickness. And of course, you can use your favorite pie crust recipe. You can use from the store or bakery. Just make sure it's nice and chilled and ready to go. Next up are apples. We're gonna pick one to use as a guide. And I'm just gonna place it on one side. I want there to be at least 2.5, even up to 3 inches of dough all the way around the apple because we need enough dough to fully wrap and encase this apple. I'm just gonna use a paring knife to trim it. And it doesn't need to be a perfect round. You know, this is a very rustic sort of recipe. It's one of my favorite things about it. This is no time to be perfect. This is a time to be perfectly imperfect. I think everyone all year round loves a good apple pie, but I think these apple dumplings, they are, you know, something that people just don't understand because, like I said, all that flavor of an apple pie, but with a lot less effort and a lot less pulling your hair out, but still a lot of opportunities to make it look really beautiful and still a wonderful vessel for some ice cream or whipped cream or any of those other dessert accoutrements. Okay, so as you can see, all of my shapes are a little bit different. They are not perfectly round. You know, they're all over the map, and that's okay because we don't need them to be perfect. We just need them to be big enough to wrap our apple. So now what I'm gonna do, I think it's a little bit easier to actually build it on your baking sheet. So you need a parchment-lined baking sheet. And you can just place your first round of dough onto the baking sheet. Choose your apple and place it right in the center. We're gonna grab it's like 2 teaspoons, I would say, of our sugar mixture, but no need to be super precise. We're just gonna put it right into the center, right where we cored the apple. And we are also going to add a little dollop of butter right on the inside as well, about 1 teaspoon. Now I'm going to pick up the dough and I'm going to pull it out and kind of stretch it and pull it over the apple. One of the reasons that Cosmic Crisp apples are particularly good for this recipe is how round in shape they are. So it's really easy to get them evenly covered. Your goal is almost to take that dough around that apple and kind of right onto the top. And then as you grab the next piece, you're gonna let it kind of naturally pleat. But Cosmic Crisp apples are a blend of Honey Crisp, which is a very juicy, delicious apple, and Enterprise. They've been working on this apple for so long to get that perfect blend of sweetness, tartness, that nice bright red color that even stays after baking. And they're so juicy. If you bite into one of these apples and eat it raw, it is unbelievable. The juice will just run down your hand in the most delicious, yummy way. And I like this recipe because it's so customizable, and that's, in general, having apples around the house. I always am halfway to dessert, especially if I've got a good baking apple that I know I can make into any kind of baked good or slice and eat raw. So now that our apples are fully wrapped, they need a good long chill. Pie dough loves to be cold when it hits the oven, and it needs a nice hot oven temperature. So we want to chill these for at least an hour, maybe even a little longer if it's warm when you're making them. I'm going to take these to the fridge until the dough is nice and chilled. It should firm up and be physically cool to the touch. All right, now these are gonna bake in a 425-degree oven until they're golden brown. Whether you leave your apple dumplings plain or whether you decorate them with starry cutouts, they bake up golden, crisp, and full of juicy apple goodness. They are made even more juicy, even more delicious, thanks to my new favorite apple, the Cosmic Crisp. Enjoy your apple dumplings and happy baking.